Hi everyone, this is Right to Life of Central California Executive Director John Girardi, and I'm welcoming you to the first episode of our Right to Life Classroom. In this series of videos, which we'll be producing on a regular basis, we'll do a bit of a deep dive into some topic relating to abortion. And this week we wanted to focus on a very timely issue, the issue of coronavirus vaccines. It's very much in the news. A lot of people have actually started to take these vaccines. But there's been some controversy about these vaccines because of some involvement with abortion. So what I want to do in this video is explain to you what that involvement with abortion is and our viewpoint on the morality of using these vaccines. Several decades ago, a lot of different researchers from pharmaceutical companies and universities wanted to use human biological material in various kinds of healthcare treatments, including vaccines. And some of these entities utilized cells derived from aborted children. They needed human tissue that was young and growing, and so in a tragic and horrible and evil act, they derived these cells from children who had been aborted. Now, these cells were used to create what's called cell lines. Basically, they have this biological material. It divides and divides and divides over the course of time, and it continues to be used today in vaccines, in all kinds of treatments. And there are several of these prominent cell lines, really a handful of them, about a half dozen or so, that are used by researchers and pharmaceutical companies today. One of these cell lines, HEK293, was used in some way or another for the development of some of the coronavirus vaccines. For the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, the only vaccines that are currently available and on the market today, some of these cells were used during the testing phase, but only during the testing phase. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines actually have no human biological material in them whatsoever. They're not made out of any of these cells, but those cells were used in testing. So what are we to think? What are we to think ethically about using vaccines that were developed in some small way from cells that have their ultimate origin in the moral evil of abortion? Well, I think it does raise some very serious questions. Are we okay with those abortions from several decades ago that started these cell lines? No, of course not. Should researchers continue to make use of this human biological material, again, derived from an aborted child? No, I don't think so. I think that these are serious moral wrongs. Given all of these moral problems with the production of these vaccines, what are we as individual end users of a vaccine, or even doctors thinking about prescribing these vaccines, what are we to do? I would think the best way for us to think this through is to look at the idea of material cooperation with evil. Material cooperation with evil refers to the idea of giving some kind of help or support to something that is wrong. It's distinct from what's called formal cooperation with evil, which is when you actually want the bad thing to happen. Material cooperation with evil is sometimes a morally justified thing. Let me give you an example. Anytime you go on Amazon.com to buy something, you are in some way, probably a small way, but in some way, giving some material support to evil things. Amazon, as a massive corporation, does a lot of very good things, it does a lot of very neutral things, and it does some bad things. Even if I'm going on Amazon to buy a nice book for myself or a toy for my kids, which are perfectly fine things to do, I might be giving some material support to some of the bad things that Amazon sells also. But I have proportional reasons for doing it. My support for the evil things is very, very far removed. My support for those evil things is not the cause of those evil things happening. So when you have a kind of remote and material support for evil, that is something that can be justifiable given the need to simply function in our very wounded international capitalist society. We don't want the evil things that happen, and we are at a point where we are very far removed from those evil things. I think similarly, we can think the same way with some of these COVID vaccines that have some connection to abortion. We don't support the abortion that developed those cell lines that were used to test the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Of course not. But our utilizing a vaccine, if we have a proportional reason to do so, is not the material cause of that abortion. It's not the material cause of those manufacturers utilizing those cells. And we also have the ability to express to vaccine manufacturers our desire, our urge, that they not keep using those cells. So what I would say is that a bit of individual discernment may be in order. For someone like, for example, my grandmother, who's in her 90s, she is someone who's classically at risk due to coronavirus. Coronavirus is most deadly for people who are over a certain age, who have certain pre-existing health conditions, and my grandmother would be in that category. I think it makes sense, in an act of discernment, while maintaining her opposition to abortion, for her to say, okay, I'll go get the vaccine. That analysis might be different for someone like me. I'm at a very low risk of death from the coronavirus. Now, if I choose not to get the vaccine, I will have to take extra steps and be extra cautious in making sure that I don't spread the disease to other people, that I'm careful in how I behave. And I think any person can decide, you know what, as a pro-life act, because I'm so opposed to abortion, I'm just going to decide, even though I probably ethically could take a vaccine, that I'm not going to. I'll take extra steps to make sure that I'm not a vector of disease for other people. But perhaps my life situation, my job is such that I'm not going to be putting lots of other people at risk, and I can take the steps needed to keep people safe. An individual may make that decision, and that may be a legitimate decision to make. But for those who discern that they have a serious reason to take the vaccine, who express their opposition to abortion, as we at Right to Life of Central California have done, and as all of you are able to join in with our efforts, then I think that that is a legitimate decision for certain people to make. We would also note that we should try to use the options that have the least connection to abortion possible. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines have a far more remote connection to abortion than, for example, the AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson vaccines, which are not yet on the market in the United States. We would encourage people to use the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines instead for that reason. I hope this all was helpful and informative for all of you. You can see links to some of our materials about coronavirus vaccines in the description to this video below. Thank you all so much, and God bless.